Christian Kanzian, Department for Christian Philosophy of University of Innsbruck in Austria, and his paper is entitled Facing Naturalism.
My name is Christian Kanzian from the University of Innsbruck. The title of the course, Facing Naturalism. In the announcement of our conference, the organizers characterized naturalism as a theory that rejects the possibility of something existing, being known, or being explained that is separate, given empirical cognition. This tradition appeals to the solutions and methods of domain-specific form of scientific inquiry, relying on them for its own authority. In my talk, I will deal with the aspect of existence. My concern is ontological. I think that the quoted formulation articulates precisely what ontological naturalism is. Only material reality exists, and what naturalists presuppose. Scientific inquiry is the authority on questions of existence. I will focus on the presupposition, starting with 3 examples from the literature that can illustrate it further. Ontology is an a priori discipline, as Peter Simon observes, since it is the task of science to investigating the nature of the world. Ontology must be modest, as Thomas Hofweber means, because if everyone finds entities, it's the sciences. Most radical, Theodor Seider. Fundamental reality contains nothing but physics, logic, and set theory. Natural science teaches us what there is, what there exists. Naturalists presuppose. In Jonathan Lowe's words, it is science, if anything, that can tell us about the fundamental structure of reality. In my talk, I would like to present a fundamental critique of this presuppositional master axiom of ontological naturalism. My thesis, it is wrong. Natural science is not at all an authority on question of existence. I cannot come up with a complete theory here. An attempt to refute naturalism in the remaining 18 minutes would be hybrid, not to say stupid. Rather, I want to present 4 elements or building blocks of a possible strategy for challenging the master axiom. If these first steps towards a strategy are promising, if ontological naturalism turns out to be a problematic project, we can face naturalism. My first building block is a reference to an authority who supports my position. The philosopher of my said contra philosophers teachit is Ludwig Wittgenstein. The core idea relevant to our context is precisely formulated in Henry Bloch's Wittgenstein dictionary, Lemma Science, where he writes, "We are prone to believe that science only, science, especially physics, can tell us what is real." Wittgenstein regards such claims on behalf of science as conceptual confusion, which must be subjected to a philosophical critique. Wittgenstein's own critique includes an exhibition of what scientific practice actually consists of and a hypothesis as to why we are prone to believe that science is an authority on existence questions. What science actually does, according to Wittgenstein, is shown in his remarks on Newtonian mechanics in Tractarian Proposition 6.341. Insofar as science aims at formulating hypotheses about natural phenomena, they bring descriptions of the universe in a unified form. Scientists bring empirical findings into a form that may also allow predictions to be made about as yet unknown data. Scientific theories order and unify empirical data, but they assert nothing about the world and do not provide an explanation of natural phenomena. To pretend otherwise is a confusion or illusion, typical for what Wittgenstein calls modern worldview in 6.3717, scientism, which we can identify with physicalism or naturalism. Naturalism, as it assumes that science is the authority in explaining the world, is based on an illusion. Wittgenstein is not only dismantling naturalistic illusion, he has also a suspicion why we are in danger of falling victim to it. In their attempt to bring empirical data into the unified form of a theory, scientists make use of models, which include some theoretical objects, as means of applying the theory to empirical data. For instance, waves, atomic, subatomic particles, but also empty space. The role and the use of models in theory building seems to be an important issue for Wittgenstein, especially the avoidance of misapplication and misinterpretation of models. My favorite passage on this subject is in the Blue Book. I quote, "We have been told by popular scientists that the floor on which we stand is not solid, as it appears to common sense, as it has been discovered that the wood consists of particles filling space so thinly that it can almost called empty. This is liable to perplex us. Our perplexity was based on a misunderstanding. The picture model of the thinly filled space had been wrongly applied." Let me focus on the crucial point of the Blue Book story. To apply a theory to the empirical data from the deeper structures of material reality would, scientists make use of models, we can sense pictures, including theoretical objects, in our case, particles and empty space. That is legitimate. Confusions arise when models are misinterpreted, for instance, as hard facts. But this is exactly what happens when we erroneously hypothesize models and take them like maps that claim something about the world, as it is paradigmatically expressed in scientific worldview and in the naturalist's master axiom. However, Wittgenstein brings us immediately to the second building block of our strategy to challenge the naturalist's master axiom. Master axiom implies a particular understanding of scientific practice. And this understanding is, to say cautiously, questionable. And so is the master axiom. It is Theodor Sider who gives us a clear idea of the particular understanding at stake. Science and naturalistic philosophy following science is writing the book of the world, to quote the title of his famous book in which he develops this idea. For Sider, physical theories in their basic structure, this is the structure of propositions of predicate logic, carve at the joints of nature. To bring in also Sider's leading metaphor in this context. You know, this metaphor from Plato and David Lewis, but Sider uses it in a prominent place. More precisely, the crucial expression here is the first order existential quantifier used in physical theories, which is what carves at the joints. This is, as Sider by himself admits, a rather strong form of realism, and brings us to the point that really matters. The master axiom of ontological naturalism implies a strong version of scientific realism. And this is a questionable implication. If, following Wittgenstein and others, we understand scientific practice as the methodological interpretation of empirical data, The use of models and their applications. If we deny that there is something claims in physics in which models appear, there are waves, there are particles, allow any decision about what there really is or exists. If we hold that physical theories do not explain reality. To put the message of the second building block in a nutshell, ontological naturalism implies realism. If the latter is false, so is the former. In a critical stance towards scientific realism, we can find support from not too few experts in the philosophy of science, who do not see the aim of scientific theory as providing a description or an elaboration of a map of reality. Speaking of quantum physics, Michael Klischner states, what we get from quantum theory is not a description of reality. Science does not exhibit entities, nor does it allow any implication about what there is or what exists in an ontological sense. Additional support comes from authors who have dealt with the concept of model in relevant scientific contexts, including, among others, Talia Knutila and Marvin Rost. They regard models as epistemic artifacts, tools that aim to provide theoretical explanations and conditions for applying theories to empirical data, or to verify, falsify them empirically. Rost and Knutila also explicitly warn against simplifying, picturing theories of scientific models. Models do not describe reality. They do not give insight into the basic structure of reality. Scientists do not picture or write a book of the world. That is why they are not authorities on existence questions, as the naturalists' master axiom pretend. But how can we understand the putative objects that scientific theories make use of, waves, subatomic particles, and must make use of, because theory building is not possible without them? What are the theoretical objects or posits of models? They are, as Jonathan Lowe and others call them, quasi-objects. Which brings us to the third building block of our naturalism facing strategy. The posits of models are quasi-objects, not entities, as it is assumed by the master axiom. In the introduction of quasi-objects, we can distinguish between meta-ontological and ontological considerations. The former concerns the distinction between an ontologically proper and an ontologically improper way of speaking. Especially in there are claims, as we find it in Eli Hirsch's theory of as-if quantification. This is based on the conviction that not every use of variables, x, y, combined with there are claim, automatically commits the speaker to accept the existence of the reference of the expression. Hirsch's basic idea is that we can also talk about something as if it were an existing entity, provided that we can do so in a reliable theoretical context. To come back to natural science, physics, quantum physics can of course provide such a theoretical context. According to Hirsch, it is not only possible but also advisable to integrate such improper ontological talk into a proper or ontologically proper way of speaking. That we can speak, because of some theoretical constraints, quasi as if there were such objects before mentioned. We can give them names, predicate attributes of them, and even count them if we allow the introduction of appropriate principles of individuation. Here we arrive at precisely what Jonathan Lowe and others have called quasi-objects. Lowe adds a further important ontological characteristic. Even if we individuate and count quasi-objects, the entity of quasi-objects remains undetermined for principal contingent reasons. We cannot say what the identity of quasi-objects consists in. we cannot provide identity criteria for them. According to Lowe, the dark creatures, as he calls them, of quantum physics are the paradigmatic example of such quasi-objects. The posits of the standard series of quantum physics have no determinate identity, which does not hinder scientists from defining metrical orders that allow these objects to be counted. Lowe also calls them esoteric objects in a non-pejorative sense. Their acceptance is legitimate only within a particular theoretical context. To allow something without determinate identity would put us ontologists in an awkward position. If we could not find support in Hirsch's as-if quantification, even from the point of view that there are, in a proper sense, only entities with a determinate identity, we can allow that for some theoretical reasons. For instance, in quantum physics, we can speak as if there were the aforementioned esoteric objects. Just have to allow ourselves to use a non-ontologically committing quantification. The aforementioned requirement of bringing improper ontological talk into the frame of proper talk brings us to the question of what such ontologically proper ontological talk should be. What do we really commit ourselves to ontologically? The answer brings us to the fourth element of our strategy. Eli Hirsch has a suggestion that I would like to take up here. He actually assumes a basic, non-as-if meaning of the existential quantifier in consequence of existence, a linguistic vehicle that really commits ontological. For those less familiar with descriptive metaphysics or ontology, beginning with Aristotle and represented in contemporary debates by Peter Drossen, this may sound a little bit surprising, not so for others. It is not the language of science, but our normal conceptual scheme that covers the basic structure of reality. The real committing quantifier is the existential quantifier of what Hirsch calls plain English. It is our ordinary use of there is the upper position that commit ontologically. But what we primarily commit to with the master quantifier in plain English are macroscopic, three-dimensional, diachronically identical objects, enduring things or substances. The priority of common sense linguistic practice initially leads to the acceptance of an endurer ontology. From the perspective of meta-ontology, we can say that the existence of things or substances is the proper mode of existence. This provokes, of course, an objection. Is this not an oversimplified deduction of categorical schemes from ordinary linguistic practice? I must confess that I am not in a position here and now to reject this objection outright. Let me just express my conviction. No, not at all. If you're willing to develop a systematic theory of such endurers and endurer quantification, avoiding all kinds of oversimplification in ontology, meta-ontology, and semantics. What matters here is that we have a fourth element of our strategy. If endurer quantification is real ontologies, to borrow again an idiom of Theodor Seider, if substances are the basic elements of reality, then the naturalist's master axiom is wrong, since one of its implications is, as all naturalistic ontologists would agree, that it is time to say farewell to endurer substances, to refer to a title of a programmatic article of Peter Simons, and to turn to a paradorantism, either in the style of a four-dimensional physical object ontology, a process ontology, or a trope bundle ontology. I come to a short conclusion. As I said at the beginning, I cannot present a complete theory here. I limit myself to sketching some elements or building blocks of a possible strategy for challenging the master axiom of ontological naturalism. It is science, if anything, that can tell us about the fundamental structure of reality. These are substance existence is the proper mode of existence. Substances, as we learn from powerful traditions in Christian philosophy, are the proteusia. Physical objects are quasi-objects, not entities. And scientific realism is problematic, as we can learn from reliable philosophical authorities. If these interrelated building blocks are promising, the stand against implications of the naturalistic Masterheitsung. We, as Christian philosophers, inspired by Ludwig Wittgenstein, could face naturalism. Thank you.